Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Captain's Table. I am your host, Captain B-Nard, and topic of discussion today is going to be DC versus Marvel. Which franchise is better? The age-old argument renewed. And here to discuss that with me, returning to the Captain's Table for the second time, is my brother from another mother, Mitchelonius. Welcome back.
Glad to be back, Captain.
Yes. And so before we get started here with the discussion, I would like to let everybody know, if the thumbnail did not make it apparent enough, where we stand on this issue. You are actually much more of a DC fan than you are a Marvel fan, whereas I am much more of a Marvel fan than I am a DC fan. So those are kind of the battle lines in the sand there for all you viewers here.
And they are strong lines that I'm about to step over.
Yes. So, but before we start, I do also want to mention that my goal here is not so much to have a pissing contest between the two, but kind of just to compare and contrast the two and how they're doing in the year 2018, because both companies definitely have quite a few pros and cons to them that I think you would agree that we are going to go through here.
Yes.
All right. So, um,
Yes, absolutely.
yes. So, um, I think I want to start off by kind of comparing these companies in a specific sense as far as their product distribution. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about there. Obviously, the animated series, live action TV series, animated movies, live action movies, of course, video games as well. But I want to start off by talking about where everything all began, and that is with the comic books, because it's in the name, comic. That is ground zero for all of this stuff, obviously. Um, so on the one hand, we have DC Comics, founded in 1934 out in California, as opposed to Marvel Comics, which was actually founded in New York in 1947. So maybe there's a little bit of an East Coast West Coast thing going on here. I don't know, um, but yeah, from the DC side, we got such iconic characters as your personal favorite Batman, of course. Superman, Wonder Woman, the Green Lantern, the Flash, Aquaman, Shazam, Martian Manhunter, the Green Arrow, the Justice League as a whole, obviously. Um, Also, the Teen Titans as a whole. Whereas on the Marvel side of things, they gave us such iconic characters as my personal favorite, Captain America, also Iron Man, Spider Man, Hulk, Thor. Doctor Strange, the Black Panther, the Avengers as a whole, obviously, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Wolverine, the X Men, Deadpool, the Fantastic Four. I could go on and on, but I think you get my point. So a lot of great characters, a lot of great stories on both ends of the spectrum there, as I think you would agree.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
So yeah, I want to start off, like I said, by talking about the comic books themselves, because for people our age and older, the comics were really the first thing that, the way we were introduced to superheroes. You know, Reading the comic books, growing up as kids in the early mid '90s, that sort of thing. And yeah, they were cool. It was a way to get acquainted with the characters and have fun, getting absorbed in all the storylines and all that good stuff. And I have to say that. Comparing and contrasting the two, I wouldn't necessarily say that one franchise had better characters or stories or plot points or anything like that than the other, because I did really enjoy both of them. Um, but I would have to say, comparing the two, I would probably have to say that I did enjoy the DC comic books, actually more than I enjoyed the Marvel comic books, and that is not coming from quality or like a standpoint of anything like that. But I would make that statement purely based on the fact that I felt that the DC comics were kind of easier to follow, easier to read. They kind of flowed better, and they kind of made more sense. As opposed to the Marvel comics, there's a lot of time travel and alternate universes and alternate timelines and that sort of thing. The whole Marvel multiverse thing, as we know, is a huge part of the Marvel comics, and inherently, I think that kind of makes things a little more complicated, a little more harder to follow, and especially if you're a young kid reading these comic books, I think it does kind of detract from the enjoyability of reading those comics. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that, considering the fact that when you're a kid, you don't want to have to. When you're a kid, you like simple things.
Right,
And when it comes down to the comics of Marvel, they're not exactly simple, to say the least.
right.
It's more of a, like you said, with the multiverse, kind of confuses things. Um, as far as like we've had debates in the past, just me and you
Oh,
in
many,
person,
many a time, yes.
where we would kind of talk about the multiverse would come up, and I didn't understand how, and even being an adult, I'm like, well, how do you have Wolverine being an iconic character for Marvel?
Right,
How do you have a feral Wolverine, and then you have a Wolverine as Weapon X, and then makes him the ultimate weapon.
right,
And then you have a Weapon X Wolverine in another multiverse that the Logan is dying because of the adamantium, despite the fact that he has healing factor,
right.
which was the whole reason the adamantium could even get put into him. So it's like, I'm sure they're all interesting, but to a kid who's going to grab a comic book, they might just lean one way because it's like, okay, that's a little bit too much. I'd
Right.
rather just read about Batman or something, like.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's how I was when I was a kid, and I'm sure you were probably the same way. And to your point, I would say even as an adult, there's some aspects of the Marvel comics that I don't fully comprehend, even as an adult, because it can be difficult to follow. But yeah, in the DC comics, with the exception of like the Flash is a big one with all the time travel that goes on in the Flash comics. Aside from that, there really isn't a whole lot of that goes on in the DC comics, which generally makes things more linear, kind of more easy to follow, kind of more straightforward. So for that reason alone, I would actually put the DC comic books above the Marvel comic books in terms of that. So,
And I would be an idiot to disagree.
of course, yes, falling on that side of the aisle, of course. Um, yeah, I think that pretty well covers that aspect of it.
Just as a side note on the comics
Oh,
too,
go
like
for it.
stuff that we've discussed between each other in the past is,
Yes,
talking about how people are always so focused on the hero themselves, and
yes,
what their powers are and things like that. For me always it was not the powers that generally intrigued me. It was what granted them those powers. What was the
the
the,
character
the origin
backstory.
of that hero himself? What
Right.
to the degree of, not to use the Flash, but use someone that more common than a lot of people know, like Batman.
Sure.
He's a hero without any powers.
Yep.
But what made him great was that he took a tragedy in his life, and he decided to. He could have been the victim. He could have just been that kid that just, lost his parents and did whatever. Instead, he went and he learned how to kick some ass, used the money his parents left him, the Wayne fortune, and
Hmm.
started cleaning up the streets of Gotham. Like,
Yep.
I like the origin of the hero, the what makes them the hero.
Yeah,
not
I would
necessarily just the
definitely.
power.
Oh yeah, and I would agree with that 100%. I like the powers too. Don't get me wrong, and that's kind of like the flashy side of the superheroes. But I 100% agree with you that it's really more of the origin story that makes the hero than just the power. And that kind of feeds into something else that we've discussed in the past. With how with DC being a little bit of an older franchise than Marvel, there are some DC fans who will say that Marvel has copied them in terms of certain ideas, and let's just take one for example, how in the DC universe you have the Green Arrow, whereas opposed to in the Marvel universe you have Hawkeye, and they both are kind of like on the surface you might look at them and you might say, okay, well they're both archers, you know what I mean? So, but that's the point that I would raise is that you can't really copyright like a generic concept, like having a hero that uses a bow, you know what I mean? Like a bow and arrow. Like that's just kind of a generic concept, you know what I mean? Because if you look at those, just for example, you look at those two characters of the Green Arrow and Hawkeye, they are completely different characters with completely different backstories, and all that stuff to them. So,
Yeah, and not not to sell Hawkeye short. I mean, but
well, you wouldn't be the
definitely.
first one, that's for sure, and you won't be the last.
Well, but I mean, if you don't know already, or if you do know, you might know what I'm getting ready to say about, you know, the Green Arrow. He's got a very tragic. He never wanted to be a superhero. That was never even in his sights,
Yeah,
and he was on a cruise, and he wasn't even really that nice of a guy. He was cheating on his girlfriend with his girlfriend's sister. The ship wrecks. She dies. He lives. His parents die. Well, his father dies, and he's the only one left on the island. And then he gets taken in and tortured, and some guy comes and saves him and teaches him how to use the arrow and the bow and martial arts and all that stuff. And
yep,
then when he goes back home, he tries to undo everything that was going on while he was gone, and he kind of grew up on that island.
yeah,
That island is his origins. That's what made him who he was.
yeah. No, definitely, and yeah, it's that's again feeds back to what we were saying. It's definitely the origins, and I think that was feeding back to where we started with the comics. I think that is really what kind of made people care about all this stuff in the first place of with the comic books, like the reasons that people wanted to read these comic books and people got so into these comic books was those stories with those characters and those plot points and all that just really pulled people in. And like, yeah, it's cool that you have all these powers and they can do all these things. And I think in the modern era of superheroes with all the great special effects in the movies and the TV shows and all that stuff, that kind of to a point takes center stage. But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the beginnings of all this, and that is with the comic books, and that was really the hook, in my opinion, to what drew people in is those great stories that were told about these people.
And I am extremely curious though as to we don't have to get too specific about it, but what does Hawkeye have a different type of story that made him Hawkeye?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not the biggest Hawkeye fan in the world. I don't know too much about Hawkeye's origin. I mean, and I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think that there's much of an origin story behind Hawkeye, from what I understand. I mean, he has, in the movies, he's just kind of portrayed as like an agent, like a government agent, and he doesn't have any superpowers per se, but he just has a really good aim, I guess you would say, and he prefers to use the crossbow over a gun or anything like that, and that's just kind of his thing. So, But
Because
yeah,
I think with that being said, the final point I'll make about Green Arrow is that Green Arrow he works with a team like Hawkeye does, and
right.
there's a female on that team named Felicity who she's like the scientist. She also creates like injections for him that if things get too crazy out there, he can hit himself with an injection,
Hmm.
and it would grant him super abilities that would either help him escape or help him finish the mission. I don't believe Hawkeye has anything like that, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, Hawkeye. As far as I know, like I said, I'm not the biggest Hawkeye fan in the world, but as far as I know, there's really nothing super about Hawkeye at really any juncture in his character. I don't think there's really anything super, any super power about him per se. But yeah.
So essentially, if he runs out of arrows, he becomes useless.
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw that happen in that was in the original Avengers movie. That actually happened. That was that was the question that everyone was wondering was what happens when he runs out of arrows, and we found out he just he falls down a building and he says he's down for the count, I guess. Uh, but Hawkeye, I think just with this specific example, I mean, in both franchises you have what you would consider like your major heroes and then like your minor heroes, and I would definitely classify Hawkeye as a minor hero as far as like in the Marvel comics go. Like he's not that big of a player. Like yeah, in the movies, like they've really brought his character to light a lot more, and they've given him a lot more of a spotlight than the comics ever did, I think. But as far as like the Marvel comics, Hawkeye wasn't really that big of a player. So as far as in comparison to the Green Arrow, I would say the Green Arrow, in my opinion, is kind of caught in the middle. Like I wouldn't classify him as like a minor hero, but I wouldn't really classify him as like a major hero either in the DC comics. But I think you're probably more qualified to weigh in on that than me.
Well,
But
he didn't start off that way. He started off, simply as his own, and then he did end up becoming a member of the Justice League
right, of
at some
course,
point.
yeah,
And like I said, I just think that in the comparison standing between the two very similar heroes,
yeah,
I feel like Marvel might have dropped the ball a little bit
with
with
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye
Yeah,
because why not give him
why not
what
develop his
everything that
character more?
yeah, yeah. Although Hawkeye does later on, and even in the comics later on, he becomes
Much
pretty
more.
badass.
Yeah, and I think we're not to jump into the future too much, but I think we're about to with the Avengers Endgame, which will be the fourth Avengers movie coming out next year. We're about to see that whole scenario unfold, which I'm pretty excited for. So,
so
um,
in that movie, you're going to get to see who Hawkeye was building up to become.
exactly, yes. So I'm pretty excited for that. That's the other thing I was gonna say was I think maybe that's part of the reason they did what they did with Hawkeye in the movies is they tried to develop him more than they ever did in the comics, which is definitely a good thing in my opinion. But yeah,
Yep.
there's plenty more to come with him in the movies to come. So, um, but
I
yeah,
mean,
so
and the costume they gave him in the comics. I mean, have you seen it?
unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, it was purple and pink.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, let's not talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, no, they that was one of the they gave him. Let me just say this is that the for those of you listening who are not familiar with Hawkeye's comic rendition, but you are familiar with his movie rendition. Let's just say that he got a massive upgrade in the
Yes.
way that he is portrayed in the movies than over the way he was portrayed in the comics in pretty much every way. So, um, but yeah, I think that pretty much covers that end of the spectrum pretty well with the comic books. The next thing I kind of want to jump to is the talking about the animated series on TV. Now, um,
Okay.
I kind of want to follow. I'm trying to follow a logical progression here because like I said, we kind of started off with the comics. Like that was ground zero. The comic books was ground zero for the superhero stuff, and then we kind of get into animated series a little more than that. After that, and again, being a tried and true Marvel fan, I did really like the Marvel animated series when I was a kid growing up. The two big ones that I remember watching a lot were the Spider-Man animated series and also the X-Men. But I did very much enjoy the DC animated series as well. The big ones over there that I used to watch a lot were Batman, and then Superman, and also the Justice League. Um, so
I enjoyed all those quite much as well. I
yes.
mean, probably up until the point where the Justice League started doing the whole Justice League Unlimited and stuff like that. I feel like he might have been taking that a little too far because now it's like every member, every superhero becomes a member of the Justice League.
Yeah, and it's like, who are all these people that I don't care about? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, no, definitely. I feel you on that. But I will say, it has been a while, with the animated series for me. But I will say, I would probably, again, I would probably have to give the edge to DC in the animated series department, and in this one, I would have to say it is actually more of a quality based opinion than as opposed to the comics. I chose, I said that I thought DC comic books were better than Marvel comic books, just for a flow and an easy to follow standpoint. But for the animated series, I feel like I have to say DC, more from a quality standpoint, and I think the reason for that actually ties to the comic books. And here's why: because I think that the Marvel comics being kind of all over the place, the Marvel comic books, that is, it was a lot harder for the creators of these animated series to kind of take that and translate it into a TV series. Because, like I said, especially with the Marvel multiverse, which is again a huge, huge feature of the Marvel comic books. Making sense of that is not the easiest thing in the world to do, especially when it comes to, marketing these products to children, younger kids. And I think that was evident in the way that the animated series play out. And don't get me wrong, I did really enjoy the Marvel animated series, but at the same time, I felt that again the DC animated series just had a higher quality, product to deliver. And I'm sure you won't disagree with that, but I do want to hear your take on it.
No, I mean I don't disagree. I mean, as far as I just kind of want to go back one step real quick because I feel
Sure.
like it's a point you missed because we were talking about how as children, there's also DC has also taken it to the next level of comics where it's you probably shouldn't read if you're a kid. Like one example would be Batman Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be any less than like 14 years, 15 years old reading that if your parents let you because they have done the adult rendition of comics, and I don't mean adult rendition as far as like nudity and thing. I'm talking about like the story itself could get
Very
so
dark.
gruesome.
Yeah, very
Yes,
gruesome. Yeah.
and anyone who's watched the Dark Knight movie, that Joker, that sadistic Joker, that's the kind of Joker you would find in Arkham Asylum,
Yeah.
in that comic. The torturous, the just wants to see the city burn, doesn't care about anything else but that. It's. I mean, it was so disgusting to the point of the Joker had cut off his own face and stapled it back on to look even more like sinister. It's
Yeah, that's some pretty dark shit right there,
yeah,
and
exactly.
and
So
I want to talk a lot about that a little bit later because that's feeds into the general comparison of DC and Marvel that I want to talk a lot about later. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. DC stands for Dark Comics, right? So you know yeah, that's there's no surprise there. But yeah, no, I agree with you. um, but yeah, the animated series, back to the animated series, yeah. So I think that like I said, you would probably agree that for the DC animated series, there was just it just felt like everything fit together better. Like everything made more sense. Like it's a little hard to explain, but that's kind of the overall feeling that I got from it.
Absolutely.
So. Um,
Yeah, you won't get an argument out of me about that.
oh no, I didn't expect it. So, but don't worry, folks. The
But
argument's coming because at this point, everybody's probably thinking who's listening to this. Wait a minute, Bernard. You opened this up by saying you were a Marvel fan, yet you just told us that you thought the DC comics were better than the Marvel comics, and that the DC animated series were better than the Marvel animated series. Yes, but there is a huge but, and the reason that I am such a big Marvel fan, more so than I am a DC fan, is coming at you right now. Because now we start getting into the live action aspect of the product that
and
DC and
that's great.
Marvel
But I did want to
delivered to
just
us.
correct one thing.
Sure.
Uh, the joke is that DC stands for Dark Comics. What it actually stands for, though, is
I know.
Detective Comics.
I know. I was just yeah.
Just
I'm
want to throw
sorry
that
if
out there.
I'm sorry if my sarcasm was not apparent there, folks. But yeah. So yes, that is
Hurted
true.
my feelings.
Sorry, buddy. But yeah. Oh, I guess I in my haste, I guess I also forgot to mention. I guess we could talk a little bit about the video game end of things. This would probably be a good time to stick that in. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Um, but
On the animated series
no, the video games.
or on the games. All right,
Yeah,
let's
the
check
video
out the
games.
games.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I feel like overall, like there's not a whole lot to say about the video games Marvel and DC because obviously you have a bunch of standalone, like the single player standalone, Marvel and DC games like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, most of which are largely bad. I think that's the general consensus. But the one great exception to that rule came earlier this year in the form of the PlayStation 4 exclusive Spider-Man game that I know you know all about. Um, so that was one that really hit a home run as far as the video game. But the general rule of thumb by most fans is that superhero based video games are usually pretty bad.
Except for the ones that you're forgetting, such
Well,
as
yeah,
a very pop one. I mean, they've won Game of the Year multiple times.
yeah,
You're missing out on Arkham Asylum.
yep. I knew you were gonna say that.
That was a Batman game. You're missing out on Arkham Knight.
Yes,
You're
also a
missing out on
Batman
the
game.
initial. Yep, you're missing. Yeah, all of these are going to be Batman games. You're, uh,
Of course.
there's been three games released through Batman. Arkham City would be the third one. Before that, the pecking order is this:
Yes.
Arkham Knight or Arkham Asylum, Arkham City took it to free roam,
Yes.
and then Arkham Arkham Knight, which essentially is completely free roam, and those games have won many, 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 many awards. Three of which winning the Game of the Year award. Um,
Yes.
so if you, to stand on one PlayStation exclusive that did any good for
Well,
you
I
is
mean, I'm not saying. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Marvel wins the video game war with DC. My real point that I was getting at was mostly the overwhelming majority of superhero games that have been made have been largely regarded as bad. And yes, there were a few like the ones you mentioned, and then the Spider-Man game that I mentioned. There are standouts to that, but it's like if you have one good game for every 10 bad games, it's like what kind of ratio are we talking here? So that's why I didn't want to spend too much time on the video game aspect because I feel like it's kind of a wash between Marvel and DC. Like I don't feel like any one franchise could claim like dominance in the video game industry. I will say though that I enjoyed, like they had, Marvel versus Capcom and DC versus Mortal Kombat, like the multiplayer games. Those I thought were, kind of fun, and they came out with, various amounts of those and all that good
Well,
stuff.
then you have Injustice 1 and Injustice 2.
Right. So, so yeah, no, I didn't mean to say that all games, all superhero games are bad, but I think definitely the large majority of them are. But yes, you
Well,
do get outliers.
you said it was a wash. I'm trying to end that wash because the thing about that is I've listed off 5 games that made Game of the Year and that are still coming out with more games because of
Right,
how good they've been.
right.
And I played a lot of video games, and the only video games that I could see that could be bad are just the ones that they based directly off of the movies, which
Which there
unfortunately
have been
Marvel
quite a
has
few
had
of
to do.
those. Yeah,
Marvel had an Iron Man game. It was
yeah,
fun to play, but nothing you could really get into because it was linear.
yeah.
I think you guys finally got it right when you did do the new Spider-Man game, which yes, even me being a DC fan, am dying to get my hands on the copy to play it.
Incredible game.
but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but that's because I know playing a good superhero game just makes up for all the rest, in my opinion. But when you put the
Fair
numbers
enough.
up of 5 and 1,
Yeah.
I think the ratio is a little bit more in DC's favor.
Yeah, it might be. The numbers might, might lean that way as far as that goes. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I haven't played too many superhero games, so I know there's probably a few that I'm leaving out.
You're
Um,
missing out Web of Shadows. That was a
okay,
fun game, but it wasn't a Game of the Year game.
right.
You're leaving out the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that
Yes,
was also based on the movie, which
unfortunately,
it was okay.
it's probably
Um,
better than the movie.
and then it probably was. And then you have your Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3 that were based off of when Tobey
The
Maguire
Tobey Maguire trilogy.
was
Yeah, yeah.
Spider-Man.
Yep.
You
Yeah, I
know,
remember.
so
Now that you're saying this, it's kind of coming back to me a little bit, but I never, okay, so basically the story is this, folks. When I was a kid, I played like a few bad superhero games, and that just kind of like ruined superhero games for me pretty much. So I haven't really dabbled too much aside from like the multiplayers, like the Marvel versus Capcom and DC versus Mortal Kombat. I've dabbled in all that stuff, but other than that, like single player superhero games, like I haven't really been too much into it just because of that. So I don't even remember what the games were when I was a kid that I played. There was something for like PlayStation 1 or something, I think, but it was not good. So
oh, the Spider-Man game for PlayStation 1,
that might have been it. Yeah, it might have been it. So
where if you fell down to the ground you died.
yeah, that might have been it. I think that was
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that
it.
either, bro. I played
So
it. I was like, "This would be cool. I like to swing around the city," but nope.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, so video games is like, it is what it is. So, like I said, that's why I didn't really want to spend too much time on that. But that is that is something we had to, touch on because that is, product distribution for the franchise as well. But
And
what I
that
was
is a
start,
win for DC.
well, maybe. But what I was starting to say before was, the reason that I am such a Marvel fan. To this day is because of what we're going to get into now, which is the live action aspect of things. And I want to start off there by talking about the live action TV series. So, a lot of good choices on both ends of the spectrum, I think. On DC's side, we mentioned it before, the Arrow TV show, which has been running for quite some time. We
Yep,
have the Flash TV show, which has been running for a little bit of time too.
5 seasons now.
Oh, is it really 5 seasons already? Geez, time flies.
Yeah.
Um,
Supergirl,
Supergirl,
she's
yeah, that
at
was the other one
season
I was going to
4.
mention. They're up to what now?
Season 4,
Really? I don't know. Where the
and
hell
then
have
you
I
have
been the
yeah,
past 3 years? I don't know.
and
Oh
then you
man.
have DC Legends of Tomorrow. I think they're on
Yep.
their 3rd season.
Yep. And what else do you got? Well, you have uh,
Teen Titans.
Teen Titans, which I'm sure you don't want to talk about that, and I don't either. So we won't talk about that too much.
Well, we can't say all shows are hits,
Oh no, I'm not saying. Yeah, I was gonna say we're not saying all these shows are hits, but these are the shows that are around. And there's Krypton, and
Yep, I
also,
enjoyed Krypton a lot. Actually, that was pretty good.
well, that makes one of us. But but yeah, we also have what was the what is it? Gotham. That's the other one. Yeah, which I
Gotham. Yeah,
think is.
Gotham's been running now for a while.
I think that one's coming to an end pretty soon. Yeah, but that's an interesting idea. And then, of course, from back in the day, the one that I was big into back in the day was Smallville. This is,
Oh my God, Smallville ran for like
forever.
12 seasons.
For it ran twice as long as it should have, but I will say that I was a fan back in the day, and I know the younger listeners might not remember that show, but it was it was a good show. I enjoyed it. I think it definitely lost its way toward the end, but it was it was a good show, especially for the first 5 seasons so. But yeah, so we have all that on the DC end. On the Marvel side, of course, we have and most of these are Netflix shows, but they are still TV series nonetheless. You have your Daredevil, your Punisher, your Iron Fist, your Luke Cage, your Jessica Jones, the Defenders, of course, and then you have the Agents of Shield you had on TV as well, and that sort of thing. So. Here's where things start to separate. I think for me, because I think that Marvel has done a fantastic job. And again, not saying that all of these shows are hits or that they're great or anything like that, because some of them certainly aren't on both sides. Both franchises have their good and bad live action TV shows. Um, but I think the getting into the live action aspect of product distribution is where Marvel really shines, because they have done such a great job in casting, in writing, in directing, in acting, in just all across the board on so many things that it's really hard for me to say no to Marvel, especially. And I think in my opinion, the best live action TV series of any superhero that I've ever watched is Daredevil, personally, for me.
But that's not
Because,
exactly a TV series.
well, I mean,
It's a
it's
Netflix series. It's a
right,
streaming series.
right. I mean, it's on, but I have to kind of lump them together because I don't want to subdivide too much, but it's basically a TV series, but it's on Netflix, like I said, as most of the Marvel series I mentioned were. Um, but I can't help but just with how well done Daredevil was, I just can't help but um, let that put it over the top for me, because everything from all seasons has just been so well done. Like I said, the writing, the casting, the acting, the directing, just everything comes together so well. Such a great blend of action and intrigue, and not so much in the TV series. They kind of don't have as much of the comedic element as the movies do, which we'll get into in a second. Um, but yeah, and my main reason for this is because when I try to look at shows objectively, and when I look at a show like Arrow, I could be like, okay, that's a really good superhero show. Or if I look at a show like The Punisher, I could be like, okay, that's a really good superhero show. But when I look at Daredevil, I go, that's just a really good show, period. Like, it doesn't have to be, a superhero show. It doesn't have to have that association with the superheroes. It has a wider appeal to it than that. And I've known a lot of people actually who are not even superhero fans, and they've told me they've watched Daredevil and they've liked Daredevil because it reaches beyond the genre of superhero show to me, to just being a really good show that just tells a really good story. And I don't know that I could say the same about any of the other superhero shows that I've watched. So that's what really puts it over the edge for me. But I'm interested to hear you weigh in and how you think about all this.
Well, I mean, I feel like we have shows like that too. Like you had mentioned one earlier. I mean, Gotham.
Yeah,
It's a pretty broad name for a show, and it's about young Bruce Wayne and what he went through, and
right.
the origins of all the people that are going to end up becoming like the Riddler and Harley Quinn and the Joker and things of that nature.
Right.
Um, but it's not so focused on that. The actual focus of the show is Gordon,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
how
No.
he comes up into power to become the commissioner. Which in the end, once Batman becomes who he becomes, him and Gordon work together to try to fix Gotham.
Of course.
So I feel like in comparison to what you were saying about the Daredevil
Yeah.
show, I feel like those two we could essentially be in the same
Could be
category as
comparable.
far
Yeah.
as not just a great superhero show, but just a great show in general because you're dealing with a lot more human characters than you are as opposed to like someone like Luke Cage who just is indestructible, I guess. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so
Right.
when he runs into something somewhere, you're not going to be like, oh, worried about him. But if you got
Yeah.
Gordon or little Bruce Wayne running in, or Daredevil, say God forbid he doesn't hear or see something that he can, or well,
Well, he doesn't see
like the
anything.
way he
But
sees.
yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
way he sees, because
No, I
he
know. I
does
know. I just had
see,
to. I had
you
to
know.
make the joke. But
But
yeah.
like something can happen to them where, like when they go in somewhere, they might not be coming out.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
feel like that adds that extra tension.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Puts you on the edge of your seat a little bit watching it, like, oh crap, like what's going to happen next?
Oh,
Is this guy
absolutely.
going to die?
And
Like
that
what
definitely
happens?
creates
So I
more
feel like,
intrigue. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll have to agree with you on that as well. As far as like those two shows being like shows that are just more than just superhero shows,
Yeah.
but as far as like we were saying, as far as just superhero shows in general too that are on TV or on Netflix, The Flash is extremely popular.
Oh yeah.
Supergirl, extremely popular. DC Legends of Tomorrow, extremely popular. Um, Teen Titans, but maybe not as popular. But you know what? It's getting there.
Yeah.
They just need to have a little bit of better casting choices, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's
that's.
where, we were saying both parties make mistakes. Well,
Oh
this
sure.
might have been a mistake that DC needs to fix.
Yeah.
Um, but
Definitely.
yeah, I mean, besides that, my thing is only reason I say I can't put them on the same level, and I still feel like DC wins this category, is simply because, and it's completely unbiased. It's just that with how good those shows are,
Yeah.
why aren't they on an actual television channel?
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. I personally, I that doesn't make or break it for me because even like shows like and I talked a lot about Daredevil because that's number one for me. But
Yeah, it's a
shows
great show.
right, but shows like the Punisher and the Defenders, those were also really good too. Um, Luke Cage I thought was pretty good. Iron Fist, maybe not so much, but yeah, I don't think that just because they're not like actually on broadcast TV doesn't necessarily take away from them, in my opinion. And I get why people would think that. They think, oh
Well,
well,
you would
shows
have to pay for Netflix when you're
sure,
already paying for cable
right. So
to watch it.
yeah, I mean, it's more like you have to go farther out of your way to watch the show. Yeah, but I think, I like to me, it's not necessarily an equivalency of just because it wasn't on broadcast cable doesn't mean it doesn't mean that it wasn't good enough to be on broadcast cable. It was just that's not who cut the deal for it. Because think we both can agree that there's been a lot of crap on cable, So
Uh, have
just
you watched Netflix recently?
oh no, I know there's been the same can be said for Netflix definitely, but that's what I'm saying is like just because a show, and I feel like some people, I don't know if you take this stance or not, but I feel like some people will think that just because a show is on, a streaming service and not on broadcast TV that somehow makes it like not as good, and I don't think that's the case at all. Um but yeah, so that's kind of that, how I feel about that. And now, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add before we get to the big one.
Yeah, well, in my opinion,
Uh huh.
and people can comment as to whether or not they agree, but I feel like shows tend to go for TV first, and if they can't get put on TV, then Netflix will be its last resorts because, truth be told, is Netflix will let anything on it.
Well, not
We all know
anymore.
that.
Not
We,
anymore.
we, we,
But that's that. I think that was more true like in years past. The past couple of years,
I don't know.
I think they're a little more choosy now. Although I guess as a general, maybe a general, historically that might be accurate. Um, but yeah, I'm surprised actually in this. Before we move off of that topic, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the big happenings. As far, and I'm surprised you didn't bring it up actually. The big happenings as far as Netflix and
I
Marvel
didn't know if
goes.
you wanted me to, so I
No, it's
figured
cool. We
I
gotta
will
we
let
gotta
you on the
address it.
Marvel side do it.
No, it's
All right,
okay.
all right.
I
I'll let you since it is happening to Marvel. I feel I owe
yes.
you the respect of you doing it.
Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that.
No
So
problem.
yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Netflix has already canceled. Well, not only Luke Cage, not only Iron Fist, but they have also canceled Daredevil off of Netflix, and and I believe it was Iron Fist that was canceled first. And when I saw that, I was just kind of like, I was like, okay, well, I was never really a huge Iron Fist fan to begin with, and I thought, okay, this could definitely be like a quality based cancellation because, like I said, I'm not gonna defend Iron Fist. I haven't fully watched Iron Fist, but from what I've read and seen of it, it wasn't that great of a show. So I could see that being the reason it was canceled. Then we
I
go.
did enjoy it.
Well, there
I
you
did
go.
enjoy it. I will say that.
Yes, and people did enjoy it definitely. Sometimes it may be, it might be a perspective thing, or it might be a audience versus critic thing.
Networks.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So then when they canceled Luke Cage. And that was a little more
yeah.
questionable for me because I Luke Cage was pretty popular. Again, I haven't fully watched Luke Cage, but I've read, and from what I've read and seen of it, it was better than that to me. It wasn't something to the point that you would want to cancel it. I thought it had a a pretty sizable following to the point that I wouldn't thought it would have been canceled. But then Daredevil, just
Like,
weeks after season 3 came out on Netflix, Netflix cancels Daredevil. And let me explain exactly why. Because the fact of the matter is, Disney is coming out in a roughly 1 year's time. Disney will be launching their very own streaming service. For those of you who don't know, it's called Disney Plus, and essentially what they're doing is they're cutting out the middleman being Netflix, and they are offering their very own streaming service like Netflix. So, in my mind, it's pretty obvious that Netflix, to try and have the last word in the conversation or to try and spite Disney and despite Marvel, decided, well, I'm not going to wait for you to take all your shows off my service and make me look bad. I'm just going to start canceling all your shows. So, haha, take that. And that is exactly how this all came about. And I feel like that, especially in the case of Daredevil, because like I said, not only was Daredevil such a great show, Daredevil was so very widely acclaimed by the fans, by critics. It was so popular. It was such a great show. And not only that, but I actually read that there was already a script for Daredevil season 4 written, and they had already planned, the actors and the producers and everybody had already planned to start filming season 4 as early as January of 2019, which is, right around the corner, folks, because we're right at the end of 2018 right now. So, in my mind, there is absolutely no way that Netflix canceled this show based on quality. There's absolutely no way that Netflix canceled this show based on reception or reviews. Netflix canceled this show and probably the other shows as well, just as a way to try, in a petty way, I might add, to try and spite Disney and spite Marvel for them coming out with their own streaming service next year. So there you go. That's the
and
story.
I can't say that I disagree with that either because the reality of the situation is, by doing that, they know they might have hurt themselves in a way of doing that too, because not for nothing. Yeah, sure, some of them, maybe they didn't really need to be there anymore. But
Yeah.
as far as like you said, Daredevil goes, I did watch that, and I did enjoy that myself.
Yeah.
And like you said, it just that kind of solidified it for me, where it's like, okay, now they're just doing this out of spite,
Oh yeah,
and
dude.
I don't
100%.
think they're gonna win. I don't think they're gonna win in the end on this one though, because you know what? All that's gonna do is give them time to do. They have a season 4 already written out. Well, it's gonna give them time to write out season 5. And who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe just extend season 4 even longer. Do like a 24 episode season. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
like you kind of get more because of the wait that had to happen. So the
Yeah.
reality is, like you said, Netflix is just doing what they're doing because they're throwing a hissy fit.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And they're trying to, it's almost like the scenario of like, say your boss calls into the office and they're like, listen, we're going to have to let you go. And then the employee goes, oh, you can't fire me. I quit. Like that, that's kind of what we're,
Yeah,
what we're experiencing here. But the unfortunate thing is that technically, and I did read this, and it does suck, but technically, because those shows are still under contract with Netflix, they all have an 18-month to 2-year hold on them. Due to their contract, to the point that they actually those shows cannot actually begin like a production or filming or anything like that. They can't; those shows can't go anywhere else and do anything else until that contract is up with Netflix. Now, here's where the interesting part comes in: is that technically, um, Netflix or Disney and Marvel, rather, I should say, could buy those contracts out if Netflix were willing to let them be bought out. However, if what we said just now about the spite factor, which is pretty obvious from Netflix, if that's all true, the odds that they're going to let those contracts be bought out is pretty low. So I'm thinking that we are going to have to wait quite some time if we want to see any of those shows. I know there were also talks of with Iron Fist and Luke Cage. There was a talk of basically combining those guys together and having them have their own show, Heroes for Hire, I think they wanted to call it, which I thought would have
hmm
been really cool because I thought that Iron Fist and Luke Cage had a cool interaction, cool chemistry between the two characters there that I would have liked to see them have a show together. So, but yeah, I think that by the time we might have to wait a little while, but personally, I think by the time that those shows are released from their contracts with Netflix, in that about 2 years time that it is, I think there's basically a 100% chance, in my opinion, that you're going to see some or all of those shows make their way onto Disney Plus, and we're going to see specifically Daredevil. I think it would be insane to me, given the reception of Daredevil. It would be insane to me that that show would not be put on Disney Plus as soon as it is legally allowed to be put on Disney Plus. So, um,
Unless they get their lawyers involved, I feel like that's going to happen too. There's probably be a nice legal battle.
Yeah, more than likely. But I guess that's the business world.
Yeah.
What can you do? But
Hopefully, it
yes,
works to our advantage. We don't have to wait too long.
yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I would like to see. Although, like I said, I kind of feel like like I said, if Netflix is doing what they're doing out of spite, which is pretty obvious that they are, they're probably just not going to want to sell out the contract, and we're just going to have to wait. Like 18. They're all either, from what I read, it's either 18 months to 2 years of a contract lock that they have on Netflix that they can't go anywhere else or do anything else with those shows. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll see how it plays out. But I think that actually brings us to our last product comparison, and this is the big one that I have been waiting for, and that is, of course, the blockbuster movies, the live action movies. And unlike all of the other categories, I think you all know where I'm going with this, especially you, Mitch.
Hmm.
um, um, in all the other categories, I feel like there is some debate, there is some argument to be had, there is some, um, you know, gray area to say, okay, well, maybe DC does this better, Marvel does this better, and DC had this good game, but Marvel had that good game, but DC had that good series, but Marvel had that good series. When it comes to the blockbuster movies, I don't think there is any dispute whatsoever that Marvel absolutely blows DC out of the water in this department. Because if you just look at the sheer numbers, you look at the reception, you look at the quality of product that has been given out over the last 10, 15 years of movies. And granted, I will say that Marvel, it really feels like and looks like Marvel has put a lot more stock into developing their blockbuster movies than DC has. And it really shows based on the quality of the product they present. Um, Everything that I said earlier about why I said that I thought that DC had better comic books than Marvel and why DC had better animated series than Marvel, those same reasons can be taken and applied to this scenario of why Marvel has such better movies than DC. And that's because everything in the Marvel movies just flows so incredibly well. Everything is so well casted, the stories are so well written, everything is just fits together so well and is just so incredibly well done that it's just a joy to watch. And I'm mainly talking about the movies in the MCU, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, of which not all of the movies that have come out that were Marvel have been a part of, but most of them have been. So we're talking about specifically the Avengers series of movies, obviously. So you have your trilogy of Iron Mans, your trilogy of Captain Americas, your trilogy of Thors, your trilogy of Avengers movies now. You have your Doctor Strange, your Black Panther, your Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. Um, I'm sure your Spider-Man Homecoming. There are more that I can't put my finger on right now. I know I'm forgetting Ant-Man, of course. Obviously, everybody forgets Ant-Man, 1 and 2. um, but yeah. So there are 20. Just to give you guys some sheer numbers behind this, there in the last 10 years, there have been 20 movies to come out in the MCU alone. So that just tells you, as opposed to, I'm not entirely sure how many movies DC has cranked out in the past 10 years, but I know it's less than 10. Um,
It is.
so it might be closer to like seven, I want to say, because you have your, and let's try to figure this out. If I'm missing anything, let me know. So you have your Batman trilogy,
Hmm.
with
Christian
Christian
Bale.
Bale. You have your Green Lantern, which nobody wants to remember. Yeah, so we won't talk about that. You have your Batman v Superman. You have
Hmm.
your Wonder Woman, and
Yep.
you have your Justice League, which you may or may not want to think about depending on your perspective. And you have your Aquaman, which just came out last week, actually. So what is that like?
Excellent, excellent movie.
Yeah. So what is that, like, eight movies I mentioned? I didn't even count. I should have been
Hmm.
counting. So yeah. So just by sheer numbers alone, and like I said, that 20 movie total in the MCU, that doesn't count the Tobey Maguire trilogy of Spider-Mans. That doesn't count the two Amazing Spider-Mans with Andrew Garfield. That doesn't count either of the Deadpool movies. That doesn't count the Fantastic Four movies, which I don't want to think about, so we're not going to go there. That doesn't, because not everything has been a winner on the Marvel movie side either, but the overwhelming majority have been. And of course we can't forget about our X. That doesn't count the X-Men movies either. So when you add all of that together, you're probably closer to like 30, 35 movies in the Marvel side, as opposed to like not even 10 on the DC side. So just by a sheer numbers perspective, you can tell like how much more Marvel has invested in the movie experience than DC, and that might be the reason for why they're so much better. Their movies are so much better than DC movies. Um, but I think what it boils down to is this: is that Marvel, specifically in the MCU series of movies, um, they have figured out the formula for success. It's like the Captain America Super Soldier formula, but in movie form. And
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have a formula.
yes, and basically what it is it's the perfect blend of action and comedy and plot twist and intrigue and just everything, and that coupled with the great casting and the great storytelling and the great plot points and just everything just fitting together so well that it just makes for a really great experience, watching it. And like I said, I don't think anybody would dare to argue that the DC blockbuster movies could even compete with this. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it, being a DC guy.
I mean, yeah, DC, if they fall short on anything, is the movies. I mean, the biggest problem that DC's having right now is just the reason why I feel Marvel's continuity with the movies sticks with so well is because you get these actors, these directors, and that constantly make those movies together, so they're able to keep it flowing, as you said,
Right.
as to where Christian Bale doesn't want to be Batman anymore, so now they had to find Ben Affleck, and then Ben Affleck doesn't want to be Batman anymore. Now Superman doesn't want to be Superman anymore. Like,
Yes.
uh, it's just things fall apart on that end. But I mean, with all that being said, I mean, I can't still digress from the fact that you know, point for DC for comics, point for DC for animated series, point for DC for video games, point for DC for TV shows, and then you guys have your big blockbuster hits. That's where I see it standing.
Yeah, and I guess I would understand why you would think of it that way. Um, the way I look at it, like I said, is in certain categories, I'm willing to give credit where credit is due, definitely, with a lot of those other things. But like I said, I think the big thing for a lot of fans is that in all those other departments there's some question, there's some debate as to who, that there's positives, you know what I mean, on both sides of the aisle. But when it comes down to the movies, you just don't have that same thing. And I think there's just so many reasons why you have that. But I think one of the big ones, that I probably want to lead with, is the fact that um, in the MCU, in Marvel, um, the way that everything just kind of feels like they have this ability um, to make you feel like you're watching something special, regardless of who it is or what it is. And more so than that, I have to commend Marvel for the job that they've done, because as I mentioned earlier, um, when it came to translating the comics into animated series, Marvel didn't do that as good of a job, in my opinion, as DC did when they translated their animated series, or I'm sorry, they translated their comics into animated series. So I feel like Marvel definitely had their work cut out for them in trying to translate those comics now to these blockbuster movies. So they were kind of put behind the eight ball, just based on, again, the way everything is written, and the fact that they're able to deliver such masterpieces and they're able to deliver such greatness while being behind the eight ball, essentially, just even more so speaks to their commitment and their quality of the product that they're putting in front of you. It speaks volumes. And that's the thing I think that kind of frustrates a lot of people about the DC movies, and I'm sure you're one of them, is the fact that there is no legitimate reason for the DC movies to not be good, because they have literally everything at their disposal already written to make a good movie, and for some reason they can't do it. They can't do it.
Like I
And
said, I think that comes down to directors
right,
and
yeah, that's the biggest reason why I think, you took the words right out of my mouth, was the fact that it feels like you get the sensation on the Marvel side of things, especially in the movies, that everyone is so much more committed to delivering a great product than they are on the DC side of things. Like, it feels like even the actors, and I don't know if it's just casting or what it is, but it feels like the people who are cast in these DC movies, it just feels like they're there to show up and collect a paycheck and go home. Like, it doesn't feel like they care about what they're doing to the degree that the actors and the writers and the directors in the MCU care about what they're doing. It feels like, when you watch Robert Downey Jr. play Iron Man, or when you watch Chris Evans play Captain America, it feels like they care about that character. It feels like they're in the head of that character, that they appreciate that character, that they're trying to portray that character. They're trying to, learn and study that character to the point where they say they adapt like the thought process of that character, almost kind of the way back in the day when DC still could make a great movie like The Dark Knight, which in my opinion was the last great movie that DC cranked out over 10 years ago. Kind of the way Heath Ledger played the Joker, is he got in the head of the character of the Joker, and unfortunately we all know how that turned out, which is very tragic. But that was the level of commitment that that actor had to playing that role, and I feel like that level of commitment is what a lot, if not all, of the actors in the MCU have for playing their character. I feel like Chris Evans gets inside the head of not just Captain America, but of Steve Rogers, the man, and says to himself, how would Steve Rogers react to this situation? How would Steve Rogers handle this? Same with, Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Hemsworth or Mark Ruffalo or anyone who plays any of these, especially the big important characters in the MCU, but not even them, just even the lower on the totem pole characters too. You get that sensation from all of them that they are so in tune with the character that they just nail the character to the T, to the point that it's really something special, in my opinion.
and like I said, don't get me wrong, I can't disagree that on the movie end of it all, that it hasn't been
Hasn't
disheartening
gone that
for
way,
DC
yeah.
fans.
Yeah.
But and many fans have said, well, we need to get the guys that are playing this stuff on TV that do that do get in the heads of the
Of
to
the
go play
characters, yeah.
on the big screen. And the problem with that is all the politics. Well, they can't, because they're locked into contracts for the TV show, so they can't just be
Yeah.
like, well, I'm going to go play Flash on the big screen now, and then I'll be back. Like, they
Yeah.
can't do that.
That would have been nice, but
It would have been very nice, but the other thing is too, you got actors that do decide, oh, I want to go do something else, and then so they
yep.
breach contract, and like they don't want to have any part of, like for example, Henry Carvel. Now he doesn't want to play Superman anymore. Like,
Yep.
okay, well, you need to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly.
enough's enough, people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But I still feel like that since we were doing this as a whole, as a build up,
Yeah.
to current day
Present day, yeah.
blockbuster hits, I still think that if we were going to give this a set amount of points, comics DC, animation DC,
Sure. Sure.
video games DC,
Well, I
TV
guess
shows DC.
that one I don't know about, but
Well,
I know
none of
I
your
know.
shows have ever made it to the actual silver screen. You've been on Netflix, and Netflix has control of your shows, and currently you have no shows because they've been canceled.
Well,
So,
we've already been through that, so that doesn't detract from the quality that we're seeing
I,
here on
but
the.
not every show on there was quality, because you left out Jessica Jones. Who watches that? That's why she didn't get canceled. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
man,
here, here's
harsh.
here's here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. So I still think there's a lot more tally marks on the DC side. And obviously, of course, the Marvel movies are great. We go watch them together, and I'm a DC guy, and
Yep.
I still sit there and I'm like, yeah, that was a good movie. No
Yep.
matter how much it pains me to say it, yeah, that's a good movie. I
Yeah.
say it. But the reality of it is that, before these movies came out, a large point that we're leaving out is that if these movies never happened and didn't go as well as they did, Marvel would have become bankrupt.
Yep.
DC was never in a position like that because of everything previously, the legacy they've created prior.
Yep.
So I think that, I think in my opinion at least, and I'm sure that, some people will agree with me, some people might agree with you because you have those two sides of
Of
the
the coin.
coin. You have, I feel like in all of this, I feel like still DC may not be able to produce the movies that you can, but overall has been the better comic company.
Gotcha. Yes, and
Make sense?
yeah, no, that does make sense. I'm not saying I agree with it because I don't, but but
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah, but that would,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, but no, that does make sense. Um, but yeah, that's the but so here's the thing. My and there's some before I weigh in as to why I think Marvel is the better of the two franchises. There's a couple more generalistic comparisons I want to make. So. Um, on the Marvel side of things, with the way everything is written and portrayed, and again, going back to the movies, and I'll explain in a minute why I'm emphasizing the movie end of things so much. And well, I emphasize the TV end too, to a good point, but also the why I'm emphasizing the movie end so much is because of the way that everything is put together. And in on the DC side of things, there's a reason that the joke we made earlier, DC stands for Dark Comics, is because everything, or not, maybe not everything, but mostly everything on the DC side of things feels kind of sad, feels kind of depressing and dark and that kind of thing. Like everybody, like pretty much every hero in the DC universe has some kind of tragic backstory to why they were created, and not everything has a happy ending, and all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't on the Marvel side either, and there's definitely a good boat of characters that have their tragic backstories on the Marvel side, but um, at the same time, there's also a lot of positivity in the Marvel world. There's also a lot of lightheartedness and humor and all that stuff, which I don't really think DC does really well. That's a big thing for me is the way everything's portrayed. Um, so I have to commend Marvel for that. Another thing,
And I do too, but not to interject, just on that
yeah,
exact topic you made about like the well meshing of it,
sure,
bro. As a side note,
yeah.
you have to watch Aquaman
I don't know if I
and
can, but
see and you have to and see and just see what they were doing with that movie, and
yeah,
you'll be like, all right, they're taking a page out of our book. You know what I mean? Like
gotcha.
you gotta because that might actually change your mind on that and what's the future to come. I don't know what they're gonna do about these main characters like quitting, but the ones that haven't quit,
Yeah.
I see them taking a larger role. Like that Shazam movie's
Reworking the
looking
way you
pretty
think
good
you see
too.
them reworking their formula and kind of trying to take after the Marble formula more of making things
Yeah,
more
because
upbeat.
they probably felt like, all right, well, Marvel took some stuff from us, so we gotta take a little bit back.
Sure. If
And
you want to say that, that's I
I,
would expect you to say that, but
yeah, well, it's
if
true
if you
though.
if you want to kid yourself that way, I'll let you. But
Okay, okay. I mean, you guys, who was the villain in your last movie? Darkseid? I mean, Thanos. That was that's who that was. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't
hey
tell the
man,
difference.
is a better version of Darkseid. But anyway,
Uh,
so but my point to that was going back to the next thing I was gonna say is I feel like another not to harp on the movies too much, but I'm gonna harp on the movies too much because it's such, and like I said, I will get to why I am harping on the movies so much in a second.
It's
Um,
because it's the strongest leg you have to stand on.
well, not only that, that's part of it, but that's not all of it. Um, the other thing is, I feel like, well, this is more of a generalistic comment too, is I feel like, but it really comes out in the movies. I feel like um, with DC, like the way the heroes are portrayed in DC, the way that everything is kind of laid out in DC is not as relatable as the way things are portrayed and laid out in Marvel, especially when it comes to the heroes. Like the DC heroes, especially when it comes to the movies, are really, in my opinion, pretty unrelatable to your average Joe. They're pretty far removed. Like especially in the newer wave of the DC movies, you have Superman, for example, who is portrayed as kind of like this stoic, emotionless, godlike figure, that doesn't really care about the people around him. Or you have, the latest portrayal of Batman that kind of portrays him as just like this apathetic douchebag dick, kind of, that like he just, he's really jaded and cynical and just all that negative. um, and I think this must frustrate you to a certain degree as well, because those portrayals of those characters aren't even accurate to the way those
Accurate
characters
to
acted in the
comics. Yes.
comics. Yeah, exactly. Because even take Superman, for example, is a great example. And in the comics, and even we talked about Smallville before, the TV show from a few years back. um, Superman was always portrayed as someone with a god's body but a human's heart inside of that body. He was always
Well, if you said, did you not watch the Justice League movie?
I not the whole thing, no.
Well, in the Justice League movie, I think they were trying to change that up because
Yeah.
I believe they felt a lot of people felt that way
Yeah.
to where
Because
him
I
and the
know
Flash
it
had
was
to get.
really bad in Batman versus Superman, and that whole thing was
Right.
that mindset
Yeah,
and
no, they really
that
portrayed him like a douche in that movie. I get that 100%.
exactly. Yeah.
But in the Man of Steel movie,
Yeah.
uh, he had to actually kill, and he didn't. Superman. That's his like the thing. He doesn't want to kill anyone,
Yeah.
and he actually had to kill General Zod because Zod was using his heat vision to, turn like try to incinerate a family in a museum,
Yep.
and Superman had got a hold on his head,
Yep.
and he's just asking him to stop, and he won't stop, and he's like trying to hold his head, but he has as much power as Superman,
Yep.
so he's like getting closer and closer and closer to the family, and then Superman like he cried right as he made the decision to snap his neck
Yep.
to protect the people. So he
Yeah.
broke his rule
Yep.
to protect the people.
Yeah, and that really feeds to the point that I'm trying to make, is that's more of the Superman that we know from the comics and from the animated series and from even from the TV shows, is that's the character of Superman that we know. Like I said, the heart of a human in the body of a god, essentially, as
Mm-hmm.
as that has always been Superman's thing. And the more recent portrayals of him, just like specifically in Batman versus Superman, have just not been that. And
Well, that wasn't the most recent portrayal. The most recent
right,
portrayal was the Justice League movie where
right, right,
he
right.
actually uh, him and the Flash had to save some people,
Yeah,
and they were in the middle of a fight with Steppenwolf,
yeah,
and Superman he heard something. He like turned his head to the left, and he goes, "There's civilians nearby." And Batman says, "I've got the Flash on it." He said, "There's too many of them." So he goes off, and then
yeah.
he meets up with the Flash. He said, "What's up, Slowpoke?" And the Flash is like, "Oh, it's on." He goes, "Okay,
I was gonna
you go
say, I thought
left."
the Flash was faster than Superman.
Yeah, older Flash. This is younger Flash,
Gotcha.
but he looks left. He tells him to go left. I'll go right. Well, so the Flash saves like a truck full of people, right?
Yeah,
And then you see Superman. He has a whole building of people that he's just flying to safety,
nice.
and then goes back to the fight to fight Steppenwolf. So I think in that the Batman versus Superman movie, it was just so fixated on like him, yes, being full of himself, but that's what built up to him regaining that humbleness.
Right,
You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. But yeah, even as far as that goes, like obviously there's more examples than just that. Like for like Batman, for example, um, the Batman as portrayed by Ben Affleck is a very has a very different attitude about him than Batman as portrayed by Christian Bale. Um, and I think that his attitude, or at least Ben Affleck's Batman has a very cynical, jaded kind of attitude toward things, which is not, um, not exactly the way that I would think that Batman should be portrayed because he has, he cares Batman from the comics or the TV shows, like he kind of has the golden rule, kind of like Superman has, right? That he
Yeah.
doesn't want to kill anybody and
Right.
that you just with Ben Affleck's Batman that just doesn't seem like that's really his MO, like he in the previous portrayals of Batman, it's we're more true to the character, I think, in my opinion. Now I think that that like those shortcomings, I think in characters just kind of speak to a lack of understanding or lack of overall understanding of the characters by the writers and the directors and maybe even the actors playing the characters themselves, which kind of feeds back to the point I was making a minute ago. About that it just feels like on the Marvel side, especially when it comes to the movies, it feels like there's such a deeper level of caring and understanding of the characters than and the storyline than there is on the DC side of things.
Right. They well, like Batman versus Superman was a very dark portrayal of of Batman, yes, and
Yeah.
Alfred made it very clear, like you've never been like this before, and he was angry, and he just wanted Superman to know that he's not a god. Yada. That movie was about both of them becoming humble again because they
Yeah.
started off humble, things happened, they weren't humble anymore. That movie rehumbled them, and then in
Right.
Justice League, Batman it was right back to who he normally was, where he
Right.
doesn't kill, doesn't care about people, he cares about people, and
Right.
I mean, and aside from that, I mean, I've seen plenty of Marvel heroes kill people, like
Oh
bad
yeah.
guys.
Oh, definitely. It's a different
So
thing.
that rule doesn't even exist on that side of the field.
Yeah, they did. As a side note, they had this interesting article, and it was like the only Marvel heroes in the MCU who haven't killed someone, and I think the only people who were on that list were like Spider-Man and the Wasp. I
Yeah,
think
I would
'cause
imagine so.
but yeah, no, it was kind of funny. But yeah, but that's always been but that kind of flows with the thing of the theory of Marvel is like the bad guys have to die. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of part of the way Marvel does business. And I don't think that that's really a bad thing. That's because I feel like most of the time that's what people want at the end of a story, is they want to see the bad guy die. Like that's kind of what a story is. You have good versus evil, and at the end of the story, most of the time the majority of the people want to see the good guy win and the bad guy die, and that's just kind of generic. That's just kind of storytelling 101 in my opinion. But um, I think that, but I think that the way that the everyone in the MCU and the way that the Avengers care um, so much about the people, I think that that supersedes the caring that the heroes in the DCU kind of have for the people. Because you always see that play out in the movies. You see everyone trying to rescue civilians all the time. I mean, hell, the entire Civil War storyline you know in Marvel was based on the fact that despite that the Avengers always tried to save as many lives as they could and did everything in their power to save a life, that there were still too many casualties, that something had to be done about it, and that sparked the entire Civil War arc. So that's always like the people are always a huge factor in the background of Marvel, which is why I think that there seems to be, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but I seem to think that there's a greater connection between Marvel and its fan base than there is between DC and its fan base. And I think a big part of that is because of the way that things are portrayed on the Marvel side. Like I feel like the Marvel heroes in general are portrayed more as like the everyman type heroes, like your Captain America or your Spider-Man, or that kind of thing, like like underdog, everyman type heroes that they'll do anything they can to save a life. um, and I don't know, you just don't get that same connection, that same feeling, I think, on the DC side of things. I mean, even hell, I mean, even characters on the Marvel side, like Thor, who's a god, for example. Like in the first Thor movie, you can say what you want about it, but I think the movie did a great job of relating Thor to the people. He's a god, but he has all these human flaws, all these human weaknesses. He's arrogant, he's impulsive, he's stubborn, and those things are his downfall. And his father Odin strips him of his power and sends him to Earth to learn some humility, essentially. And it's always there in like all the Marvel movies. It's always there, and it's an undeniable factor that I think is the main reason for why there's just this almost untangible connection that I feel between like Marvel and its fan base, essentially. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about or not, but that's kind of the best way I can describe it.
Well, no, I get what you're saying, but I mean, I think how do I put it? The point, I feel like the point's being missed to where, like, to reference Batman,
Yeah.
he makes it the statement clear every time, even when like superheroes wanted to, you should end. Why doesn't he ever kill the Joker? Why doesn't he ever kill the Joker?
Yeah.
Well, because if he did something, like if he killed, that would make him essentially a bad guy, because you're doing exactly what the bad guy is trying to do. So
Right.
it's a matter of stooping down to levels. Like it's either you're the hero or you're the villain,
Either you die a
and
hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
exactly, which is a quote from The Dark Knight. So
Yep.
my point is though, they try to I think that they try to hold on to that more than any other franchise, because the reality is when you kill the person you've been going after, as opposed to doing the lawful thing and finding a place to put them,
Right.
and sure they may get out again and yada yada yada, and then but that's
Enter
why the
Daredevil.
heroes don't, that's why the heroes don't go away, because they're just going to be there to get them again.
Right.
And it's Batman makes a great point. He's like, why am I going to kill when that's what the bad guys are doing? Why am I going to stoop down to that level just to make sure that they go away? And trust me, it's a conflict he battles with constantly. Like when
Sounds very similar
Jason
to
Todd,
Daredevil.
yeah, I mean, and when Jason Todd, was found out to be alive after the Joker, killed him, and or quote unquote killed him.
Right.
Um, and then it's just him, Jason Todd, and Batman in the room, and he's telling Batman, to either shoot the Joker or shoot him, because you need to break that rule. He
Yeah.
needs to die. He needs to die. Like you won't even kill him. He killed me, and you won't even kill him. And then Jason Todd shoots at Batman,
Yeah.
and like Batman turns around, and he makes that comment. He goes, you think I don't want to? He goes, but the problem is, you go to a dark place like that, you might not ever come out, and then that's what would make him the villain.
Yep. Yeah. No, and that's
So the fact that Marvel characters are so quick to kill the bad guy,
yeah.
it just makes me feel a little like it's a little bit of a tainted heroism there, because it's like what you should do. You're completely nullifying. You want to talk about your man superhero. Well,
Yeah.
bring him to the cops then. Let the
Yeah.
cops deal with him from there. Let
Yeah.
the
No,
law handle it from there.
I understand what you're saying, and I the way I would I guess summarize it would be I think there's two sides to every coin, and I can definitely see both sides in this regard. I definitely get your point of what superheroes like Batman and Superman would think about the the no killing and all that kind of stuff. But I also see the other side of it too. Like if you have someone who's that bad and there's no hope for them, and that if you let them live they're just going to do the same thing over and over again, and more innocent people are going to get hurt or lose their lives because you didn't do what had to be done. And a perfect example, like on the Marvel side of that, the perfect example of that is in Daredevil. Actually, going back to that with the interaction we have between the Daredevil and the Kingpin, his greatest villain in the TV series to this point, is that because Daredevil refuses to kill the Kingpin, more and more people just keep getting hurt, more and more people just keep getting killed. And it's like, I'm not going to say which path is right and which path is wrong because it's not my place, but you decide, everybody decides for themselves, like is that what's the better option, what's more worth it, is it the better option to take the moral high ground and sacrifice how many people in the process, or is it
But
better
that's the
to
hard that's the
Right, no,
hard
that's the
decision
hard
a hero
decision.
makes.
Like I said, I'm not making the decision one way or another. I'm saying, that I'll leave the question open for, everyone to draw their own conclusion to. Is it better to take the moral high ground, or is it better to eliminate the problem, And
But if even if you eliminate the problem, that person can act as a martyr for another even more
Oh yeah, no,
sadistic person to
definitely.
come to fruition.
There's always the chance they could create a revolving door, or in the case of the like the quote that you brought up from Batman, it's like you start going down a slippery slope, and a couple maybe X amount of kills later, now you're the villain, and that's a perfectly
Hmm.
legitimate point to make, absolutely that has happened with some heroes have become the villain in a lot of stories, that the hero, eventually ends up becoming the villain. And, like I said, that's why I said I'm going to leave it open for everyone to draw their own conclusion. Um,
Sounds good. Sounds good.
um, but yeah, so I know we're pushing quite a long broadcast here, so I want to get to wrapping things up here. Obviously, very heated topic that brings out many emotions from the passionate fans here that we are. But the point, I know I said it a long time ago, but I finally got there. The reason that I push on the movies and the TV shows so much in this discussion, and that is the reason is this, and this is also ties in with the reason why I feel that Marvel is the superior franchise to DC, and that is the fact that right now we are in the year 2018, about to be the year 2019, and society has changed, society has evolved, technology has changed, and technology has evolved to the point that those classics, the comic books that you and I grew up with, and generations before us grew up with, or even the animated series, those kinds of things don't carry the weight that they do anymore in the year 2018. Um, the bigger focal points of the entertainment industry in the year 2018 are the live action shows, are the blockbuster movies, and not even and those are the areas that I feel that Marvel excels at, the live action stuff. Like I said, I'm not going to argue that think that DC has written better comic books than Marvel. I think that DC has produced better animated series than Marvel. I think what I after this discussion I would be even willing to say DC has produced all in all better video games than um, Marvel has. But when it comes to the live action, like I said, and that's really where it's at as far as the entertainment industry in the year 2018 heading into 2019, Marvel excels, and that is why I think not only that. but it's the other factor that I hadn't even mentioned through all this is it's more of a, well, I guess I did kind of touch on it earlier when I was talking about the movies, but it's more of a what have you done for me lately type of feeling that I have. And when I look at the trajectories of DC and Marvel as companies, and this feeds into something that you said earlier, is the fact that a short, what was it, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was, Marvel, the company, was on the verge of bankruptcy because of various factors, and they upped their game, they changed the game, and they put out a better product, and they kept producing a better and a better and a better product, and they strived to be better, and they became better by that. And so they've tried and succeeded so hard in doing that, that it's like you look at that end of the aisle and then you look at the DC end of the spectrum, and it feels almost like DC had gotten complacent with their success to the point that they had kind of let their quality slip on their products. To especially not in the last couple of years, I think they realized that they're starting to lose the fight, so they kind of have to get back in gear. But I feel like especially you know 5-10 years ago, it became very apparent to me that the same thought and the same quality was just not invested in the DC product, in my opinion. And so, like I said, it's like a what have you done for me lately scenario. And over the past 10 to 15 years, I've witnessed the company of Marvel raise its game and become so much better than it ever was before, and become so much more, and take these, these comics that were maybe difficult to follow, and take these stories and plots, and they've taken it and shaped it and molded it into something so much better. And I see the exact opposite on the DC side of the aisle. I see them taking these great plot points and heroes and stories and concepts and just making them worse when they put out their newer products. So that is why I side with Marvel, and that is why I feel that Marvel is the superior franchise of the two in the modern day. So there you go.
My turn.
Go for it. I think you touched on it
Uh,
before, but yeah, go for it.
well, I agree with what you say as far as in the modern day Marvel the movies. Yes, clearly they're better, but my point is that DC they've they've never had competition the way they have it now. So maybe yeah, they got a little stagnant, but that doesn't take away about the factor that when you say the word superhero, Iron Man isn't the first one to pop into your head. You know, the Captain America isn't one of the first one to pop in your head. When you say superhero, Batman, Superman, these heroes of old are the ones, regardless to the movies. This is what someone thinks when they think you're a traditional superhero. Again, because it comes down to the complexity, not just the power. It comes down to the origin, not just the power. It's you can't simply look past everything that got to this point and then say now that we're at this point, this is better. You know, DC, it's a different type of like you said, there's two sides to the coin, and DC is on that other side of that coin.
It's a different type of
And
entertainment, essentially.
right. So it's hard to add humor into a movie like Batman. It's hard to add humor into characters that have a very dark upbringing. I mean,
Fair
and
enough.
even on you said you brought up live action TV as well. I mean, like I said before, I mean, I still feel like that category. I still feel like DC has it because we have a lot of successful shows on network cable that are multiple seasons in that people love to watch. because it plays true to the, you know, to the comics, to the origins of it all. And I feel like when what DC has done to hurt themselves in the movies is that they've kind of strayed away from their origins, and they tried to create a new modern type of hero instead of just taking the hero of old and modernizing that hero. Um, so I guess my point is I feel DC is still a better company because, I mean, like I said, everything I've said previous, you got, when you think superhero, you think Superman, you think Batman, you
Yeah.
think Green Lantern, you think Justice League
Well,
when
apparently,
you think superhero.
DC doesn't think Green Lantern when they think Justice League. Apparently.
Yeah,
Oh
well, not
snap!
all of your movies were good either. I mean, not
No,
all your movies were
I
good
meant
either.
the I that was my shot at I can't believe it took me this long to take a shot at the fact that there was no Green Lantern in the Justice League movie, because that's been a big
Uh,
sticking point for me. Yeah, I mean we could spend a lot of time that we don't have talking
but
about that, but um,
but like I said, my closing thoughts on who is better is I still hearing everything, and I still feel DC stands on top just because of their legacy and the fact that, when characters change mantles, it's not like it goes to some random person that, the superhero ran into. You know what I mean?
sure,
It's someone within the family, like the Flash, for example. Like his son
except the
would
Green
would
Lantern.
become the next Flash, who had his own identity as the Impulse, and you know,
Yeah.
um,
No, I get what
DC.
you're saying. I do get what you're saying. I mean, it's really I never really thought about it like this up until this point, but it's really kind of a case of you know the past versus the present if you think about it, because it's really like historically DC has been the top dog as far as the the superhero industry goes, and like I said, the past 10 to 15 years we've kind of seen a shift um, toward Marvel, coming into its own and really establishing itself as the juggernaut that it is. So it is kind of a case of like past versus present almost, you know what I mean, of legacy versus the here and now kind of. That's kind of an
I can see that.
interesting way. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thought that I never had up until this point. Um, so I think
Well, I would
that's
be curious to see what other people think, because you and me, we can go back and forth with reasons all day and all night about it.
oh sure,
Um,
absolutely.
but I would be very curious to see, after hearing this and putting their own thoughts in, what people think about it. I mean, do you think that legacy should be overshadowed by uh, current times, or do you feel that legacy is more important
Yeah,
than current times? Because the reality is, Marvel started making these movies before, well, these real movies before, we didn't think of the Justice League when we were doing, uh, the Dark Knight trilogy, things like that. But there's always been a grand plan, to do the Avengers without Wolverine, you
yeah,
know, with with Marvel
yeah.
for whatever reason.
See, that's the other thing
Um,
that I failed to mention. I know this is kind of just another side tangent, but that's what happens a lot here. The thought that I had was the fact that Marvel, the thing that another thing that really gasses me toward Marvel is the fact that um, they've had so much success despite so many factors working against them. And I think I touched on that before, but there are so many other factors that I didn't even mention that were working against Marvel, in putting the MCU together, such as the fact of not having the licensing rights to the X-Men, not having the licensing rights to Spider-Man up until the last couple of years, not being able to put Wolverine in the Avengers. I mean, can you even imagine with how successful? I don't think there's much of a debate that the Avengers, movie franchise, the MCU is one of, if not the biggest, movie franchise in the world right now. And I can't even imagine how much bigger that would be if they were able to get Wolverine, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine specifically in the Avengers. Can you imagine? Like,
Well, I mean, considering he was technically the first Avenger.
yeah, no, I mean, and company copyright licensing rights are what they are. But I think if they would have been able to get something going there, I think they probably would have had to invent like a new currency to quantify the amount of money that Marvel would have made for that. Like, having Wolverine in the Avengers, but like I said, that feeds to my point of the fact that Marvel's hands were tied pretty hard in a lot of places in a lot of ways, with stuff like that, and yet they still found a way these past 10 or 15 years to rise above all of that. And I, in my opinion, again, that is the mark of true greatness, in my opinion, is when you can rise to the occasion, almost like a superhero, like Captain America would, when you can have everything working against you and you can still rise to the occasion and you can still rise above it all. That is a mark of true greatness to me. Like, take, as another tangent, take the Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. Before the Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out in 2015, I think, myself, a whole lot of people, myself included, even being a big Marvel fan, I was like, Guardians of the Galaxy, why do I care about the Guardians of the Galaxy? Like, whatever, and they made such a good movie and they made such a great product out of that that it made me care. It made people care. You know what I mean? And that is another mark of true greatness, in my opinion, is that if you can take something that not many people care about, like the Guardians of the Galaxy is a great example, in my opinion, and you can do such a good job that you make people care about it, you know that you've made it. You know that that is greatness right there.
One word for you, bro.
Yeah.
Batman. All right.
One word for you, bro. Actually,
Batman.
no, no, it's more than one word, but it's uh, Justice League minus Green Lantern. That's one word. Come on, I mean, we have to. I know we don't have any time, but for the love
that's
of
the Avengers.
God.
That's the Avengers minus minus Logan.
Yeah, but they had no choice because of the licensing rights and everything. And the companies that owned whatever the rights to the characters. But my God, like, I'm sorry, but I can't get over it. I'm sorry, but I just cannot get over a Justice League movie without the Green Lantern in it. I just can't get over it. It just
I can't get over, and I can't
I
get over
can't
an
get
Avengers movie without Wolverine.
But it was licensing rights. It's not their fault. That's what I'm saying. Is like, see that again. Like, going back to the overall point that we're trying to make here of why I prefer Marvel over DC is like, I feel like DC had it all. Like, they have all of the tools at their disposal to make something great, and they just don't when it comes to movies, especially. They just don't, but there's no excuse for it. Like I said, in the Marvel side of things, like, they have so many factors working against them and they can still turn out a great product at the end of the day. Like, that's the real core of my support of Marvel
And
is
like I said, I won't disagree that you're beating us in movies right now, but that's the only thing I can give you because TV shows we have you,
eh
and then
debatable.
everything down the line from there we have you. I
eh
mean,
Debatable.
we've had over 12, was it 12 seasons of Smallville? We
Oh
had
God, the
uh
last six
we've got
shouldn't have existed, but you
oh,
know.
I loved them. They
Oh man.
you have Gotham, which is a show that is just incredible. You've got Green Arrow, you've got The Flash, which is a very popular show. I
I
mean,
think I don't know.
and
I've
and
Flash.
they didn't need to go to a platform like Netflix. Like they went right to the TV stations. And they said, yeah, I would assume the way that it worked with you guys is you guys went to try to go to TV. They were like, nah. and
Well,
then you went
maybe
to
so.
Netflix.
I mean, that could have happened. We don't know. But that kind of feeds even more into my point of of why I think Marvel is superior to DC is just because they don't have that advantage. Like because DC is an older franchise, is a more established franchise. Historically, again, as you pointed out before, you have history on your side. So when you go into a TV studio and you say, "Oh, we want to do a Flash TV show," everybody knows who the Flash is. Sure, you know what I mean? Like if you go in to a studio and you want to do Supergirl, sure, people know who Supergirl is. You know what I mean? So history, I think in DC's case, history is on their side versus you go, "Oh, we want to do a Luke Cage TV show." A lot of people are like, "Who's Luke Cage?" We want to do an Iron Fist TV show. Who's Iron Fist? Like history is on DC's side. I won't dispute that. And I also, despite what we've talked about, I won't discount that either because, history is very important in getting us to where we are as well. But what I'm saying is, again, my point will remain the same is when you have your back to the wall and you are the underdog, because for the majority of this interaction that we've had between DC and Marvel, I will grant you, yes, Marvel has been the underdog in most of those interactions, and historically, like I said, history is on DC's side. But like I said, over the past 10 to 15 years, the present, due to all of the hard work and the dedication and quality product that Marvel has cranked out over the past 10 to 15 years, the present is on Marvel's side.
Well, I guess at this point, only time will tell. Is it legacy over present?
Yes, we will
We
see.
are clearly we are clearly never going to sway each other. So
Oh no, yeah.
it's
So I
up to
think
you, folks.
I think we're good here. But yeah,
It's up
no,
to you, folks.
that is right. Yes, leave it for the fans to decide. Which do you like better? Whose products do you like better? Of any of the topics that we've discussed here. And don't forget, there is plenty more to come in 2019. Is just right around the corner. And I know I don't know if for a brief moment you want to tell us about what DC has in store for us next year. I know on the Marvel side, we have much anticipated Captain Marvel movie ahead of us. We have an even more anticipated Avengers Endgame movie ahead of us, which I personally cannot wait for. And we have another Spider Man movie, Far From Home. Ahead of us. So, three sure to be blockbuster movies heading into 2019 on the Marvel side, and I know there's a bunch of other stuff going on. There's some more TV shows and more video games, and I'm sure more animated series and stuff like that to come as well. So,
What video games
oh, I don't know. I just assumed there was something.
off the movies,
It's a
though,
safe
right?
assumption. Oh, here's another little side note. I think it was either November or December of this year. I'm not sure which. When did Into the Spider Verse come out? Which, by the way, as another side note, I have to say, you want to talk numbers? Into the Spider Verse
I
made.
don't want to talk numbers.
Well, oh yeah, that's right. You don't. I forgot. But Into the Spider Verse, an animated movie. Most of the time, animated movies never even hit theaters, and Into the Spider Verse grossed roughly half of what Aquaman grossed at the movie theaters for a comedic relief animated movie. That, my friend, speaks volumes to the current state of affairs here in DC versus Marvel. But I digress. You know, but yeah. As far as DC goes, I believe they have.
There's a lot of kids in the world that like to go watch stupid movies. So anyway,
I
as
guess
far as
so. I
as
believe you
far
have.
as
I'll let it go, but I believe you have. We have Shazam coming out on the.
Shazam, that's the only one coming out in 2019.
Gotcha.
Our movie set is going to be coming out 2020. We have three movies coming out in February, April, and June.
Yeah.
Uh, Pretty one back to back.
I was gonna say that's
So
Wonder Woman is one of them, I think, right?
Wonder Woman 1984.
Yep.
You have Cyborg and Birds of Prey.
Okay, that's
Um,
that's what it was. Yeah, I didn't know the other one,
yeah,
the third one. Yeah, and then I know there also there's a Green Lantern Corps, which I'm sure everyone's excited for after the last Green Lantern movie. There's a Green Lantern Corps movie set for 20 either 2021, I think it is,
I
or
believe so.
yeah, that's coming soon. And I know on the Marvel side, peering farther into the future, there's talks of a another Black Panther in the works, and also another well,
Well, woohoo.
another Doctor Strange, I think, coming soon, and there was another Guardians of the Galaxy, but we all know how that turned out. um,
Yeah.
so,
I mean, your Venom movie was really good too.
well, hey, the fans liked it. I mean, that wasn't an MCU movie, but hey, the fans
Well,
liked it.
it said Marvel. It said Marvel.
Well, Sony, Sony can't be trusted with movies. Although I will say as far as Venom, we didn't talk too much about the non MCU Marvel movies. But as far as they go, Venom, Venom was what it was. I thought it was pretty good considering they had to omit Spider-Man from Venom's origin, which is pretty impossible if you want to tell an accurate story. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I
He
thought
can't have Venom without Spider-Man, so
yeah, but I thought all things considered, the Venom movie was pretty good actually. Definitely didn't warrant the drastically low score the critics gave it. Um, but yeah, we also had earlier this year Deadpool, obviously a non-MCU Marvel movie, which was another home run. As a side note, it's kind of funny that the same actor who played the Green Lantern, which was
yeah, so
widely
about
regarded
that,
as one of the worst superhero movies ever created, could go ahead and play Deadpool, which was has been a widespread success. But
he only complains about the budget every freaking movie he has, so can't be
yeah,
that
he's
successful.
it's part of the
So
humor. It's part of the humor aspect. You got to get into that
and
humor, man. Um,
and as far as movies that have come out this year, I mean, definitely get out there to see Aquaman because, just like you said about Venom, you watched it, I watched it. It was a decent movie, but definitely check out Aquaman. It doesn't deserve the reviews it's getting. It's very true to the comics. It gives you him young. It gives you him middle age, middle young, teenager.
I think
And it kind of,
the problem with that, like I don't doubt that Aquaman is probably an okay movie. But the problem with it is that it's Aquaman, and we
well,
all
that's
know
just the thing. It,
Aquaman
it
has
brings
been.
Aquaman's actual powers to light
Yeah, but I'm talking like
because
the problem with it being Aquaman is like Aquaman's just been like the butt of every superhero joke for the past like 50 years or since he's
well,
been written pretty much whenever, so it's like
well, I don't know if anyone is going to want to make this guy a joke. Trust me. So,
yeah,
like I said, it was a. I watched it. I'd watch it twice. I mean, it's a
fair enough.
great movie.
Fair enough.
Definitely buying it on DVD. It brings a whole new light to show you but just how badass Aquaman is.
There
His
you go.
all of his trials and tribulations. What he had to go through to even become Aquaman. Because he didn't consider himself that until he renamed, he became king of Atlantis, and he's got a bit of a struggle going on himself too, being, a half breed, a surface dweller and an Atlantean. So
Yeah.
it's a very very good movie.
Yeah, and I guess on that note, we'll probably cut it. Who knows what the future holds? All we can tell you for right now is we've come to the conclusion that you're a DC fan and I'm a Marvel fan, and that's just the way it is.
And we just got to see what the fans think.
Yes, we will see. Yeah, we'll have to see what the fans think, and what the future holds for both of these franchises. And it will sure to be entertaining because at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, I think that is what it's really all about, is the entertainment. Um,
Yep.
on that note, we will cut it. And speaking of entertainment, I hope that all of you listening were entertained by the discussion here. I want to thank my guest, Mitch, for joining me once again.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. There's no one else I'd rather debate the comic war with. So, but thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos, more episodes of the Captain's Table to come, more new conversational topics, new guests, all that good stuff. So, that's it, and we'll see you next time.